You are at Accessibility is a Moving Target at Drupal GovCon. And let's see, I'm on the wrong tab. Okay. Before I begin, I want to start with that I am presenting on Ohlone lands, specifically the Mutsun region in Northern California. And I want to quote Northwestern University because I think that the statement that they have is very powerful. It is important to understand the longstanding history that has brought you to reside on the land and to seek to understand your place within that history. Land acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or historical context. Colonialism is a current ongoing process, and we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. And again, that was from Northwestern University. I am Amy June, title Camel Case. I am the open source community ambassador for Canopy Studios. I also do QA engineering and accessibility testing for them when I'm not working in the community. But my prime position with them is working in the community. I help organize Ally Talks, that's A11Y, stands for accessibility. It's an online meetup where we talk about all things accessibility. It's not just Drupal specific, it's pretty technology agnostic. I do help a lot with giving back to open source projects by mentoring both in the WordPress and Drupal space. And I'm a member of the community working group community health team as well. And then my doors are kind of shut and not all the way open. And so we might get a visitor here and there. So I want to introduce him ahead of time if he happens to stop by. His name is Spotty McSpots-a-lot, but we call him Spot for short. He's a really cute cat. But again, like if you hear him, I might have to adjust and pet him, you know, so because that's what we do, right? Virtually, we adapt to our situations and we love our little fur friends. I work for Canopy. We are an open source digital company. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about what is accessibility. We're going to talk about some terms and definitions. We'll go into the ADA, 508, WCAG, POR, talk about some user agents, that's assistive technology. We're going to talk about the life cycle of a website, designing for accessibility, and accessible content as well. So how do we embrace accessibility? First, we need to understand what it means. You know, in the context I'm going to talk about today, it's about producing like rich content and having our websites be accessible to everyone. And this is across digital assets. Why do we design for accessibility? Not only is it the law, but we want to include a wider consumer base for our products and services. You know, we want to be as inclusive as possible. According to the Center for Disease Control, 26% of people living in the US live with a disability. And that's a lot. If you break down that number, that's 1 in 4. You know, that's roughly 61 million people. And remember, as we get older, everyone becomes a little bit more disabled with time. There's temporary disabilities, you know, there's long-term disabilities like vision loss. There's those short-term disabilities or temporary or situational disabilities like, hold on one second. Sorry, my computer is not letting me do some stuff. Okay, back to it. You know, there's a situational disability, especially like where we are in the shelter in place and pandemic. You know, we have noisy environments where we're working. You know, we have things like doctor's appointments where we get our eyes dilated. We also need to remember that not every disability can be seen. You know, I live with hearing loss. You don't know that. There's debilitating pain, there's fatigue, there's dizziness, there's mental health disorders, there's learning differences, as well as those hearing and vision impairments as well. And being accessible means everyone can readily access what you're offering. This means service and venues and content as well, you know. And this is very important to me, that when we talk about accessibility and inclusion, we're not giving special privileges to people. We're making sure that the barriers are removed. So I always like to have a little quote, and this person, Kate Bornstein, she looks so fun. You know, here she is, you know, laughing with this bright green jacket on. She's an American playwright, actor, and she does a lot of gender theory stuff. And she says, stop tolerating or accepting differences as if we're so much better for not being different in the first place. Instead, let's celebrate our differences, because in this world, it takes a lot of guts to be different. So in like, to make that story a little shorter, we need to celebrate our uniqueness. So I have some terms and definitions, but I'm going to breeze through these because I'm sure a lot of folks already know them. So then there's a lot of letters out there. So I just want to talk about a couple of them. There's the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and this basically prohibits discrimination and guarantees that people who live with disabilities have the same opportunities and chances as everyone else to participate in American mainstream life. Section 508 is a federal procurement law. What it does is it requires federal agencies to maintain and use information and communication technology that's accessible to people who live with disabilities. And this is regardless of whether or not those people work for the federal government. Bill 81C, that's the Accessible Canada Act. We want to ensure a barrier-free Canada to Parliament. It aims to benefit everybody who lives in Canada, especially those who live with disabilities. And then we have the W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium. And it's an international community that develops a lot of the guidelines to ensure quality and growth of the web. And then this one is WCAG or WCAG. People say it all different. The WCAG, that stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And the goal of this set of success criteria and guidelines is to really just have a single shared standard for all of our assets. And it's primarily intended for our content developers, the people who create our authoring tools, people who use evaluation tools and develop those tools as well. And really, it's anyone who wants or needs a standard for web accessibility. And then I like this little last part, and I'm going to read it because it's on the slide. Accessibility, inclusion, and user experience are very different things. They complement each other, but they're very different. So we're going to look at WCAG 2.0. This is sort of a little history lesson and going into what's on the horizon. 2.0 is a standard of more than 40 guidelines that are used to improve usability for different abilities. And they're based on the POUR principles. And I talk about these a little bit more in the next slide, but what that means is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And it's really just the high-level principles that are given an acronym, you know, POUR. So perceivable means that the user can identify content and interface elements by means of the senses. You know, what can we touch? What can we see? What can we feel? Operable means the user can successfully use controls, buttons, interactive elements, navigation, you know, just what it says, making sure that we can operate those things. Understandable, we should be able to understand and comprehend the content and remember how to use the interface. And then robust, this applies to like assistive technologies, you know. We want our users to be able to choose whatever technology they want to interact with our goods and services, you know. They should be able to use assistive technology to interact with online documents, multimedia, any digital assets, really. And so just to break it down one more time, we want to accommodate people's visual needs. You know, we want to make it easy to see. We want to make sure that people can interact, so we accommodate their motor needs. You know, some people are unable to use a mouse. So we have to think about our multimedia content and deliver it in a way that can be operated with the keyboard alone. That's just one example. We want to make sure that controls are properly labeled so that they're announced properly to folks who use screen readers, or It can be operated effectively by speech input users as well. We want to make sure that our content and our assets are easy to hear, so we accommodate auditory needs. Some people just can't hear audio, or they have audio processing issues. Therefore, we really have to think about our audio content, things like podcasts or audio recorded lectures. They really should be accompanied with a transcript, and then videos should have, well, they must be provided with closed captions. And then the last one is make it easy to understand. So we accommodate cognitive needs. We just want to take all these 4 principles and make the experience as equivalent as possible across all of our websites and all of our digital assets, regardless of things we can't control, like how much light's in the room or what operating system they're on or bandwidth even. And then we have WCAG 2.1. This is everything that 2.0 has, plus 17 new items, and I have a couple of things that were included in 2.1 that weren't necessarily addressed in 2.0, line height, orientation, color contrast, non-text, and so much more. And then our WCAG guidelines are broken down even further into compliance levels, the A, the AA, and the AAA, and each increasing A indicates more success criteria that we need to follow. So level A is like your minimal compliance. If your assets do not meet this level, it means that it's really hard for people with disabilities to use. The AA indicates more of an acceptable compliance. It means that your website is usable and understandable by the majority of people. And then we have the AAA compliance, which is really the optimal compliance. It means that your website is accessible to as many users as you possibly can have, with or without disabilities. And that level A really indicates the highest level of usability as well. So what's on the horizon? 2.2 was initiated with the goal to continue the work of 2.1, and it improves accessibility guidelines for 3 major groups: users with cognitive or learning disabilities, users with low vision, and users with disabilities on mobile devices. So 2.2 is everything that 2.1 has, plus 9 new items. And I'm not going to go into the individual new guidelines because I really want to stress that no matter what guidelines are coming, it's our responsibility as web designers and content authors, and really everyone on the team, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, anyone who cares about digital accessibility really needs to keep track of these guidelines and know about them. And even though these criteria, or there's more criteria even though these things are in draft, they're important enough for someone to list them. So even if they don't get into the guidelines, remember they were important for someone. So this is where our empathy comes into play. And the accessibility guidelines working group recommends that all of our sites adopt 2.2 as our new conformance target, even if our obligations mention previous versions. It's to provide improved accessibility and really to anticipate our future needs, because again, accessibility is a moving target. And then we have 3.0. This applies to web content, to our apps, to our tools, to publishing, and all of our emerging technologies on the web. 3.0 presents a new model and guidelines to make web content and applications accessible. They support a wider set of user needs. They use new approaches to testing. And it also allows frequent maintenance of the guidelines. And the goal, I think, really is to keep pace with technology because it's always changing. 3.0 supports this evolution by really focusing more on our users' functional needs and improves the accessibility of our products across all of our platforms. And 2.2 and 3.0, they change the way we think about these guidelines as well. They're taking into account more disabilities. They're thinking more about cognitive disabilities. And that's something that wasn't really considered before. We want to be able to apply more technologies than just the web. And these guidelines are really opening up the space for that, like augmented reality or virtual reality, voice assistants, all of those kinds of devices. And we want to consider all of the technologies that people use, including our web authoring tools as well. You know, our developers need to have support from our guidelines as well. It really, this 3.0 and 2.2 really expand the scope of the current success criteria. And it really comes down to that accessibility is not static, it's dynamic, and it's never really done. It's always changing, and we always need good sources of information in our tool belts. You know, this can be attending conferences, it could be online meetups, it could be subscribing to newsletters. You know, really doing our research and finding credible sources of information and add them to our weekly reading lists. You know, most of us who work at agencies have professional development time worked into our schedules, you know, making sure that we have a place where we can go every 2 weeks, every month, you know, but more often than once a year. I put 2 resources up here from the W3C because they're sort of that first source of information. They have a blog and they have a Twitter feed. Whatever method of content you prefer will have resources. You just need to curate them and be dedicated to seeking out that new information. Just recently, I was on Twitter and I was reading some posts, and I always say that the first rule of ARIA is to use HTML5 because it's semantic. And honestly, because I just read this last week, I haven't done a lot of research, but I felt because accessibility is a moving target, I needed to throw in a slide on it. That, you know, ARIA is often misused and folks don't use it. Folks just don't use semantic HTML5. And there's a new set of requirements. It's ARIA and HTML. It was proposed just September, so 2 months ago. Last month, I don't know, time is such an illusion these days. But the set of criteria will aid authors in the development of web content. So please go ahead and read that again. I didn't have time to research it, but this looks like a really good addition because ARIA is often misused. So user agents, these are assistive technology. Sometimes we'll see it abbreviated as AT. It's any software or device or equipment that helps people. We work around these challenges that people have in learning and communicating and functioning on the web. Screen readers, you know, they convert text to speech. We should keep in mind that screen readers can be used along with other visuals on the web page for folks with cognitive challenges as well. They're not just for blind people. There's alternative input devices. You know, this is the alternative to your typical mouse or keyboard interaction. And this is for users with physical or cognitive impairment. And they can include head pointers, motion tracking, or eye tracking, single switch entry devices, speech input software, tactile keyboards. There's a picture up here of a refreshable braille display, you know, and that changes the points dynamically as the text is read to speech. There's screen magnification software. You know, over the years, it seems like font sizes are getting smaller and smaller, but I do think it has to do with my age. But I'm continually having to hit that Command++. And speech magnification software is true to its name. It enlarges the screen content. It's easier for us to read, especially if we're living with partial sight impairment. But some screen magnifiers also have text-to-speech functionality as well. And there's more assistive technology devices. And the reason why I mention these is because sometimes if we don't know people who use these, or if we don't use them ourselves, it's hard for us to think about all the different things that people use. I'm a hospice nurse by trade. And so I understand how hard it is for some folks to access digital information across the web. Close family members of mine have quadriplegia, you know, and so I have that unique perspective, but I realize that not everyone has those. We have eye tracking, you know, this is called eye gaze sometimes. It's used to monitor eye movement, to control the mouse pointer, and it really detects blinking to initiate mouse clicks. There are accelerators. This is software that helps reduce the effort needed to type or click. Keyboard customization, a lot of us use this already as developers, but for assistive technology, it includes changing the mapping of the keys, assigning shortcut functions, filters, doing sticky keys, and this supports single-handed typing. There's our pop-up and animation blockers. These are sometimes web browser plugins or other software tools that stop those annoying automated pop-up windows and the redirection that happens with those. And sometimes they also provide the ability to stop, pause, and hide animations as well. I talked about, or I had the image of the refreshable Braille display. This is that mechanical terminal that displays Braille, and it moves dynamically by raising and lowering those pins. We have reading assistants, and they do a couple of different things. They customize font size, font type, and spacing. Reading assistants can scan the text for complex words and phrases and linking them to glossaries. They hide less relevant parts of the content, such as sidebars and heading areas, but they can also read the content aloud and highlight where we are on the page. And the last one I want to mention are page maps. These are displaying a small image of the entire web page with an indicator highlighting the portion within the web page that's currently being viewed. These can be our site maps. So let's look at how some folks use assistive technology. There are so many different combinations of browsers and devices and really ways to access information. You just need to be creative. And again, empathy goes a really long way here. You know, some people recommend blindfolding yourself, hiding your mouse, turning the contrast really low. But I want to emphasize, even if we do these things, we will not experience these digital assets in the way that native users use them. They can help build your knowledge around them. But as a sighted user, I will never understand completely how a blind person uses a screen reader. But I want to do a couple of examples. So we're just going to kind of roll the dice. I'm on the Caltrain. That's a train here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm traveling from San Jose to get to the San Francisco Drupal users group. Actually, nope, this example, that's for the next one. But okay, suppose we've misplaced our mouse and we only have our keyboard to navigate. I might also have low vision, and so I have my zoom amped up to 200%. And perhaps because I did that, the page has shifted into responsive size or mimics design. We need to make sure that the page's footer turns to accordions and that the links and the text sections are still accessible to that keyboard, because remember, that's all I have. And I need to make sure that there's no keyboard traps. Now factor in that maybe I'm using text-to-speech software. The content flow on the page should really match how it's read, you know, have the same flow and be predictable. I might also have CSS and images disabled. We need to make sure that I don't miss out on important visual cues that are important for context and content. Okay, so back to the Caltrain story. I'm traveling from San Jose to San Francisco Drupal users group, and I'm on my cell phone. You know, I need websites to be responsive. I need to not limit the screen orientation as well. I want to make sure that I can have it in portrait and landscape mode. I need to know that there's only one scroll bar. I can't navigate side to side and vertically at the same time. The train is absolutely packed. It's standing room only. You know, I want to watch my favorite television program, but I can't reach my headphones in my backpack because there's someone standing right behind me. So I want to have captions to fully understand what's happening on the screen. And remember, it's winter, you know, it's probably raining because I'm in San Francisco. I've probably had too much coffee and I'm a little bit shaky and I've dropped my phone. The touch target needs to be large enough for me to activate without the crack getting in the way. Again, you know, rolling the dice and having all of these different scenarios, you know, you got to test all of the different combinations to really understand how folks are using your products. So I want to talk a little bit about the life cycle of the website. What is a typical life cycle of a website? That can depend on what kind of workflow you have. But what I've seen a lot is we draw up wireframes and we do research while getting stakeholder input. Then the research gets passed on to the user experience and the design team. The developers get involved and the QA person may be adding placeholder content, you know, because it's hard to test whether or not your site functions if you don't have content. There's stakeholder handoff, and the site is just sort of popped out on the other side, leaving the content creators and the editors to finish off the site before launch. But I want to talk about roles and responsibilities because all of those tasks that were listed in the life cycle of the website have people assigned roles. You know, they perform these tasks. Designers, front-end developers, back-end developers, our QA people, our user experience, our product owners, our editors. We need to make sure that we're giving all of those roles accessibility responsibilities. And this really comes down to having cross-functional teams. I attended a session at AxCon in the spring with Glenda Sims from DeQ. She said that 2/3 of the issues that DeQ finds on their websites could have been resolved at the design phase. And that's one of the first phases if we look back to that last slide. So I want to extrapolate. Those errors are moved all these levels and they could have been resolved during that first or second phase. If the accessibility discussion starts with the wireframes and the developers and the designers can weigh in at the same time, there's really not much to fix before that stakeholder handoff. So we need to empower our designers and the people doing the research to imagine, or even just to have accessibility in their mind from the start, you know, because fixing an issue in production is so much more complicated than when it's in the design phase. But then we also need to think about our content editors and our content creators. We need to empower them and set them up for success. You know, if we train our designers and if we train our developers, we should be training everyone who has access to that website, because after it's handed off, our editors are the ones in the website from day to day. You know, long after the designers and the developers are finished, they're creating text and images for us. You know, they're painting pictures for us. So we really need to make sure that everyone is involved in that accessibility process. So I want to reimagine that life cycle that we saw in that linear plane and start with your wireframes and designs, but also audit them for accessibility. So, you know, this is that linear format, you know. So let's reimagine and inject user testing at the wireframe and research level. And then we test our designs as they go from sketch to user experience, you know, for usability. And then we test and we audit at the development phase while the content, the placeholder content is added. And then we test for accessibility at all phases of development, or better yet, we bake accessibility into our websites from the beginning. Because if we do that, it really alleviates some of those headaches later on. We all have professional development time where we're, you know, honing our skills for HTML and we're learning, you know, new React. We should all be learning accessibility as well, because that's part of our responsibility as content creators. So let's reimagine that life cycle from the linear to more circular. You know, This process is a form of continuous website improvement. We need to remember that accessibility is never done. We want to make sure that we strategize and develop in a style that allows our content creators and our stakeholders to have flexible changes as the guidelines evolve. So I'm going to say that again. We want to develop in a style that allows flexible changes as guidelines evolve, because we know that those guidelines change over time. We want to make sure that our solutions have impact, that we create and implement best practices, and we do it iteratively, again, with each phase of the website. And we also want to learn as we iterate. We want to understand what works through the cycle and what doesn't. We want to have retrospectives with the team. And when I say team, I mean the whole team, because we all have our different skill sets and we all sort of celebrate each other's function in the team. And one of the best ways we can learn is from each other. Do you have accessibility reviews and audits? Is it just going uphill like in a 36 horsepower Volkswagen Bug? It's just like that. Once you start the momentum, it keeps you going. And so that learning and iterating is really important. The continuous website improvement can be really challenging at first because we might not be used to like having that sort of agile workflow. But once you get the wheel spinning, you get that traction and momentum. So I want to go back to those roles and responsibilities. There's some pages, it's called the accessibility roles and responsibilities mapping. It explains different roles involved in accessibility. And these are not like set in stone. These are just sort of those like guidelines that you can change that works with your team. They have the analysis role group, and that, it's really about business requirements and user stories, what concerns you have with the project as it's being delivered, on your agreed upon business beliefs, and its focus is more about the business vision. We have the author role group, it's responsible for creating all the text represented by the deliverable. We have the design role group, it kind of explains the different life cycle of the design process. We have a development role group, we have our front-end developers, we have our back-end developers, we have our JavaScript developers. We have our testing role group, these are our QA testers, our user experience people, our UI people. And then we have the administrative role group. And remember, like, everyone has a job. It starts like at the top. If your stakeholders and your admins and your PMs and your CEOs are all part of this accessibility process, it trickles down. So designing for accessibility, design and content creation can be similar, but they happen at different times of the website's life. Design is before the launch, and content can happen at all phases of our life cycle. And I just want to go over a few different design aspects, and then I'll talk about content in a minute. So we want to make sure, for better readability, that we use visual and semantic space. Space is an important visual design tool that helps us identify groups of related content, and it really sort of delineates unrelated content as well. If we provide the right amount of space between lines of text, line height is applied automatically. We really want to use that space to our advantage. We want to make sure we use clean typography. We want to avoid changing the typeface from that specified by the website. We want to avoid using all capital letters. Readability is reduced greatly because words now take on a uniform rectangle, meaning that readers can't identify words by their shapes. Don't underline your text. We really want to reserve underlining text for identifying links on our page. We want to make sure that we have a consistent left margin. That really makes reading easier. We do not use two spaces after a period. That's left over from our type days, so be aware of that. And we want to make sure that we support text resizing. You know, check how your content responds to enlarged text. And then accessible content. Your code is accessible, but what happens after time when your content is added? And this is one of those moving targets, you know, especially when a team of people involved might have access to a WYSIWYG with all the bells and whistles. But fortunately, it's something that's more straightforward to remedy, and accessible content can be an easy win for folks looking to improve the accessibility of their site. And again, remember that content is entered at every step of the life cycle. So know your audience, you know, fix your language to your audience and your contents, you know, stick to predetermined reading levels, you know, put information in a logical order with the important details first. We want to make sure that we use alternative text. You know, the purpose is to describe the image to those who are unable to see them. This isn't only for people who use screen readers, but it's also for people like me who live rurally and have images turned off in my browser because it takes too darn long to load. We want to use familiar language, you know, using words and familiar combination of words. We really need to strive to communicate with our readers, not impress them, you know, so don't use uncommon or showy words, you know, in regular content. We want to avoid jargon and buzzwords. They're unlikely to be clear language to everyone. And often these words are too general and vague and can lead to misinterpretation or like empty, meaningless text for some folks. We want to be consistent with the words that we use. If we refer to the same person or object several times, always call them by the same name. Be careful when using symbols, you know, pure things like rare characters and certain types of punctuation. Characters like the ampersand or symbols such as the % sign might be unfamiliar to people. Remember, we live in a global society. We want to be careful about using acronyms and abbreviations, you know, providing a key the first time we use them. And also we need to think about searchability, you know, and better SEO ranking. The words you use in your copy should reflect the words that people enter in search engines. Plain language, you know, language that's difficult to read, can be a barrier to a lot of folks, you know, particularly people who have cognitive disabilities or low reading literacy, and people for whom the content is unknown, you know, it could, or maybe it's written in an unfamiliar language. So people who have disabilities that affect the ability to access and read content, we want to make sure that they're not held back by complex language. And using plain language also benefits people who maybe English isn't their first language. You know, if your content is meant to appeal to a wider international audience, plain language is even more important. In general, we want to keep our words and sentences and paragraphs short. And I only have a few minutes left, but I want to talk a little bit about testing tools. And the tools I like to talk about are free. You know, I work in open source, you know, and I like the idea of free tools. So I just want to go over a few of them that really help me when I do some of my accessibility work. Now, this isn't an end-all list, but these are tools that that are really valuable to the testing process. Screen readers. This is an essential piece of software for blind or visually impaired people. But I do want to really acknowledge that to get an idea of how people really interact with your website, it's super important to have native users test your technology. There's the Lighthouse group. You know, they have several places worldwide where they train people who have been blind all their life or have recent vision loss to use screen readers, and they teach people how to use the software and provide services and paid positions for people to test websites for you. The Wave tool, it's not necessarily my favorite, but a lot of stakeholders know about this tool, so I like to make sure that I run this tool. It's a suite of evaluation tools that help authors make the web content more accessible. It's a browser extension with like one-click functionality. There's the browser extension in the inspector tool, the Axe tool. It's called the Accessibility Engine. It's a JavaScript library, and it's open source and available on GitHub. Lighthouse is an open source automated tool for improving the quality of your web pages. This is in your inspector window as well. It does all kinds of different testing, you know, not just accessibility, but it can do SEO testing for you as well. And the keyboard. I cannot stress this enough because I don't use a mouse. All functionality of your digital assets must be usable with the keyboard. So users need to access and move between links, buttons, forms, and other controls using the tab key and other keystrokes. You know, websites should not require a mouse or have a hover thing. You know, for example, a pop-up calendar should also let users type in the date. So, you know, we have to be mindful of, if we can get to things from the keyboard and we open something up, can we get out with the keyboard as well? And I really advocate, like, people just open up your web page, start to hit tab and see what happens. You know, sometimes all of the content is missing, you know, so be very mindful that some people don't use a mouse. There's the WebAim contrast checker. It's a free website that helps determine the accuracy and clarity of the text and the contrast of your visual elements. So you can use either the inspector window and pull out some hex codes, or there's some eyedropper tools that you can use to get those hex tools, and you just drop in your foreground and background color, and it will give you different examples of what passes the WCAG success criteria. And then the SiteImprove accessibility checker. It's a tool to evaluate a web page for accessibility issues at any time. It provides intuitive visual feedback about your content by highlighting detected issues. The tool has changed a little bit over the last couple of years, but I still really enjoy this free tool. There is a paid service from SiteImprove, which is okay, but they do have this free browser extension. And I love it because it not only highlights errors, but it also highlights warnings and makes suggestions as to what you should manually test. So that's, you know, because again, you know, well, I never said this, but automated tools are okay and they're great, but they only catch what they're programmed to catch. And right now, a lot of the tools are only programmed to catch 40% of our errors on our websites. So manual testing is super important. There's the accessibility project checklist, that's A11Y, short for accessibility. This checklist uses the WCAG as a reference point. But remember, you know, the WCAG is a shared standard for web content, you know, but this checklist is a great checklist for manual testing as well. And I'm almost out of time, so I promise I'm going to finish up real quick. Zoom 200%, you know, screen magnifier is that software application that increases the size of the text and the graphics on our computer screen. We want to make sure that we check validation for CSS and HTML. You know, it's an important characteristic of an accessible page that it's free of syntax problems. You know, it's easier for our technology to go through when there's no errors. And the last one is the readability test tool by WebFX. It takes the text on your web page and it gives you a score for the most used readability indicators. And I think there's 6 or 7 of them up there, depending on what reading level you're going for. And then I have the links to the tools, you know, and that link that I shared at the beginning of the hour, you know, and then I have some additional resources. I have a couple of things that I mentioned, the new ARIA and HTML, the W3C blog and Twitter. And I'm at time, but I want to thank you. There's a QR code up here. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm always around to answer questions. Volkswagenchick is my handle on Twitter. That's VOLKSWAGENCHICK. Again, thank you. I don't see the chat, but I do see that there is some Q&A. Can I get to that? I do not have any experience with Moncito to track accessibility issues. One of the questions is, do you test for accessibility and or require a certain level of accessibility for your websites or projects? It really goes back to the standard that you set, but right now, the success or the criteria that people are most aiming for is 2.1 at the AA level, but we should really be able to look ahead and look at those 2.2 levels and 3.0 levels as well. If Canopy clients could do one thing to make your day, what would we do? Contribute back to open source in any way possible. And Mike, yes, it was a rad presentation. Mike and I are friends, and I'll give you some context is, I think the word awesome is not very accessible, because when I look at the word awesome, I think of only some awe. So I tend to try not to use that word because I think of things as lots of awe, but then awful has this like negative context. It was just one of those words growing up that I never understood. But anyway, thank you. And I really appreciate everyone's time. And with that, I am going to stop talking.